I'm Maggie, and let me tell you something. When you're making more money than your partner, you think they'd show a little more respect for what you bring to the table. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy hearing about relationship drama. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. So, Eddie and I had been together for 3 years, living in this decent 2-bedroom apartment for about 6 months. The rent was $2,400, which felt steep, but Eddie was obsessed with those exposed brick walls and that little balcony where he could mess around with his grill like some wannabe chef. I made $85,000 in pharmaceutical sales, while he pulled in $65,000 doing technical writing, basically making instruction manuals sound less terrible than they actually are. The salary difference had always been there, but lately it was starting to bug me more. I mean, I'm out there crushing sales targets, dealing with doctors who think they're God's gift to medicine, schmoozing clients at fancy dinners, and Eddie's sitting at home in his sweatpants writing about software features nobody cares about. The disparity felt more obvious every month when I'd see our paychecks. During one of our usual Tuesday dinners, takeout pad thai because neither of us felt like cooking, I decided to bring up what had been on my mind for weeks. Eddie was doing that thing where he methodically separated his noodles from the vegetables, taking forever to eat like some kind of food scientist. I've been thinking, I said, watching him pick through his food with surgical precision. Since I make more money, shouldn't I have more say in our financial decisions? He looked up with that slightly confused expression he gets when I interrupt his little routines. Those dark eyes of his always seemed to be calculating something like he was running numbers in his head instead of actually listening. More say how, he asked, setting down his chopsticks. Well, like vacation planning, furniture choices, which streaming services we keep. I contribute more financially, so logically, my vote should count more. I wasn't trying to start a fight, it just made mathematical sense. It's only fair. Eddie took a long sip of his beer, which he always did when he was processing something. The guy never gave immediate reactions to anything, always had to think everything through, like he was solving some complex equation. You're absolutely right, he said finally, and I felt this little surge of satisfaction. Your money, your rules. I was surprised he agreed so easily. Usually Eddie wanted to discuss it more, or think about it overnight. Classic stalling tactics from someone who couldn't make decisions quickly. But this time he just nodded and said we should split everything proportionally based on income starting tomorrow. Really, you're not going to argue? I asked, leaning across the table to kiss him. Nope. Starting tomorrow, we'll split everything proportionally. Fair's fair. I kissed him properly, then feeling like we'd finally reached some adult understanding. I knew you'd get it. This is why we work so well together. That night, while Eddie was in the shower, I felt genuinely good about our conversation. Finally, he was recognizing what I brought to this relationship. I made more money, I had the better career trajectory, I dealt with more stress. It only made sense that my preferences should carry more weight in our decisions. The next morning, Eddie was unusually efficient. While I was getting ready for work, I could hear him on the phone in the kitchen, but I was too focused on preparing for my client meetings to pay attention. He seemed more energetic than usual, moving around with his purposeful efficiency that was honestly kind of attractive. By lunch, my phone started acting up. I was in the middle of a call with a potential client when the line went dead. When I tried calling back, I got a message saying my service had been suspended. I figured it was some billing error and made a mental note to deal with it later. Then I got an email that my car insurance was being canceled, effective immediately. My stomach dropped. I had a client dinner that evening and needed my car. When I tried to log into Netflix during my lunch break to decompress, the password didn't work. Same with Hulu, HBO, Disney Plus, and Amazon Prime. By the time I got home, I was furious. Eddie was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, looking way too calm for someone who'd just sabotaged my entire day. He had this expression I'd never seen before. Not smug exactly, but satisfied in a way that made my skin crawl. What the hell is wrong with you? I demanded, dropping my purse and crossing my arms. I couldn't watch my show at lunch. Planet Fitness says my membership is canceled and my phone died during a work call. Do you have any idea how unprofessional that made me look? I'm just implementing your new system, he said, without looking up from his screen. Since you make more, you should pay for your own things. I'll cover 43% of joint expenses. You'll cover 57%. That's proportional to our incomes like you wanted. That's not what I meant, I said, but even as the words came out, I realized how weak they sounded. Then what did you mean? He asked, finally looking at me with this genuinely curious expression. like he was a scientist studying an interesting specimen. I stammered something about shared expenses versus personal expenses, but he was already turning his laptop around to show me a spreadsheet that made my chest tighten. He'd been tracking everything he'd been paying for: my car insurance, $180 month my phone bill, $45 month my gym membership, $120 month all 5 streaming services, $75 month total, even groceries since he did most of the shopping. When you added it all up, he'd been paying about $400 more per month than me, despite making $20,000 less per year. The numbers were right there in black and white, color-coded, and organized with the kind of anal precision that made Eddie so insufferable sometimes. "But I buy dinner sometimes," I said weakly, grasping for any argument. "Twice last month," he replied, pulling up another tab that showed actual receipts, totaling $47. "This is financial abuse," I said, my voice getting higher. "No, this is exactly what you asked for. Proportional responsibility based on income." He closed the laptop with this finality that made me want to scream. Your words, not mine. I tried everything to get Eddie to see reason over the next few days. First, I attempted the sweet approach. Made him coffee in the morning. Okay, I reheated yesterday's coffee and added extra sugar, wore that red lingerie set he'd bought me for Christmas. Even sat through an entire episode of that stupid space show he was obsessed with. But he just thanked me politely and continued with his proportional system. Every morning he'd update his spreadsheet tracking our expenses with this mechanical efficiency that was honestly creepy. It was like living with an accountant who happened to look like my boyfriend. When being nice didn't work, I decided to call in reinforcements. My mom, Shantae, has always been my biggest supporter, and I knew she'd help Eddie understand how ridiculous he was being. I put her on speaker without telling him, figuring she'd set him straight about how relationships actually work. "I cannot believe you're financially controlling my daughter," she screeched the moment she heard his voice. "This is abuse, plain and simple." "Hi, Shantae," Eddie said calmly, not even looking up from his dinner. "Actually, Maggie decided she should have more control since she makes more money. I'm just respecting her wishes by letting her pay for her own phone like an adult." I grabbed the phone and hung up before Mom could respond, but the damage was done. She heard Eddie's side, and for the first time ever, she didn't immediately take mine. When she called me back later, she actually asked if maybe I'd been a little unreasonable about the whole thing. The real crisis came when I realized I had that pharmaceutical conference coming up in 2 weeks. The one I'd been bragging about for months. It was my chance to network with the regional managers, maybe finally get the territory expansion I'd been working toward. This conference could literally change my career trajectory. But Eddie had been covering my TSA pre-check for the past 2 years. My credit card had all the airline miles accumulated from our trips together. My Uber account was linked to his payment method because it was more convenient. Suddenly, none of these things seemed convenient anymore. I approached him Thursday night, trying to keep my voice casual. "So about the conference next week. What about it?" he asked, not looking away from his laptop where he was updating that damn spreadsheet again. "I need to book my flight. The company only reimburses after the trip. Sounds like their policy hasn't changed." I gritted my teeth. "Can I borrow your credit card just for the flight? I'll pay you back as soon as I get reimbursed." "Why would I do that?" He finally looked at me, and there was something different in his expression, colder, more calculating. "You make more money than me. You should have savings." That's when I completely lost it. I started screaming about how he was sabotaging my career, how he was threatened by my success, how he was a pathetic excuse for a man who couldn't handle being with a strong, successful woman. I called him weak, told him he wasn't man enough to support his girlfriend's ambitions, said he was probably intimidated because he knew I was going places, while he'd be stuck writing instruction manuals forever. He just sat there, eating his sandwich, watching Michi have a complete meltdown, like it was mildly entertaining television. When I was finally done, gasping for breath and feeling my throat raw from yelling, he said, "Are you finished because Jeopardy's on?" I threw a coaster at him. He ducked without even looking away from the TV. That night, I must have called every friend I had. I told them Eddie was being controlling, that he was trying to sabotage my career because he couldn't handle my success. Within hours, my Instagram was full of DMs from my girls calling him toxic and manipulative. My best friend Everly even sent me a voice message saying Eddie was literally abusing me financially. But when I showed some of them Eddie's spreadsheet, trying to prove how petty he was being, something weird happened. My friend Camden from work actually took his side. "Wait, he was paying for all this stuff while making less money?" she asked, scrolling through the numbers. "Maggie, this doesn't look like abuse. This looks like you were taking advantage of him. I stopped sharing the spreadsheet after that. After my friends started blowing up Eddie's social media based on my version of events, obviously I decided to fight fire with fire. If Eddie wanted to play the spreadsheet game, I'd show him how it's really done. I spent an entire weekend creating the most comprehensive relationship budget anyone had ever seen. Color-coded charts, pie graphs, projected annual costs, the works. Sunday morning, I presented it to him like I was delivering a TED Talk. I'd set up my iPad on the kitchen table, even made coffee for both of us, to create the right professional atmosphere. I've been tracking everything, I announced, opening my presentation with a flourish. And when you factor in emotional labor and aesthetic contributions, I'm actually contributing way more to this relationship than your little spreadsheet shows. Eddie looked skeptical, but he sat down and listened as I went through each line item. Interior design consulting, $500 per month for choosing our throw pillows, arranging furniture, and creating a cohesive aesthetic vision for our space. Social coordination, $300 per month for managing our social calendar, posting couple photos that maintained our image and handling all communication with friends. Meal planning, $200 per month for researching restaurants and deciding what we should order for dinner. Relationship maintenance, $400 per month for providing emotional support, managing conflicts, and keeping our connection strong. So actually, I said triumphantly, clicking to my final slide, when you factor in all my contributions, you owe me about $600 per month. Eddie stared at the screen for a long moment, then started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, actual full-body laughter that made him lean back in his chair. "You're billing me for imaginary services," he said when he finally caught his breath. "They're not imaginary. I make our apartment a home. I maintain our social presence. I coordinate our entire lives together. You bought 3 pillows from Target and post Instagram stories." That stung because it was reductive and missed the point entirely. It's about creating an aesthetic vision. It's about emotional labor that women always do for free. Right, and what do I get to bill you for? He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. At support, $150 per hour. For every time I fix your laptop, set up your new phone, or troubleshoot your work computer. Car maintenance, $200 per month, since I take both cars for oil changes, tire rotations, and inspections. Handyman services, $500 per month for assembling all the furniture you order, hanging pictures, fixing anything that breaks. Personal training, $100 per session for helping you with your workout routine. Accounting services, $300 per month, since I do both our taxes and manage all our financial planning. That's ridiculous, I said, feeling my carefully constructed argument crumbling. More ridiculous than charging me for throw pillows? I grabbed my iPad and stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. But I was so angry and flustered that I forgot to close the spreadsheet properly. When I came back out an hour later to get water, I found Eddie still sitting at the table staring at my iPad with this unreadable expression. That's when I realized he'd seen the other tabs, including the one labeled Exit Strategy. My stomach dropped. I'd been planning this for weeks, mapping out exactly how I'd leave Eddie once my career situation improved. The plan was to string him along for another couple of months while he covered my expenses, wait for my territory expansion to come through along with the salary bump, then find someone who actually appreciated what I brought to the table. I even had apartment listings saved and a timeline mapped out down to which moving company I'd use. That was just theoretical, ecos. I stammered, reaching for the iPad. Like everyone has those thoughts sometimes. Everyone plans their breakup down to the security deposit, Eddie asked, not moving away from the screen. You even researched which utilities you'd need to set up. Look, relationships are complicated. I was just thinking through options. Options. He closed the iPad and stood up. While I was paying your bills and planning our future, you were planning your exit. It wasn't like that, but it was exactly like that, and we both knew it. Eddie walked into the bedroom and came back with his laptop. Within 10 minutes, he was on apartment hunting websites, scrolling through listings with the same methodical focus he brought to everything else. "What are you doing?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. "Looking for my own place. Found a nice studio closer to my office. Rent's only $1,400. Amazing what you can afford when you're not subsidizing someone else's lifestyle." The next morning, Eddie informed me he'd already given notice on our lease. "What do you mean you gave notice? This is our apartment." "Well, I stay here. Actually, only my name is on the lease. You said you'd add yours later, but never got around to it." The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't afford this apartment on my own. Even with my higher salary, I'd been living paycheck to paycheck, spending everything on clothes, dinners out, and maintaining the lifestyle I thought I deserved because Eddie covered all the boring stuff like rent and utilities. I missed the pharmaceutical conference because I couldn't afford the upfront costs for flights and hotel. My company required receipts for reimbursement, and my credit cards were maxed from trying to maintain my lifestyle without Eddie's financial cushion. My boss was furious. The conference was where they announced new territory assignments, and I missed out on the expansion I'd been working toward for months. Meanwhile, Eddie was packing his stuff with this calm efficiency that made me want to scream. 3 years of our life together, and he was sorting through it like he was organizing a filing cabinet. Every item got evaluated. His stuff went in boxes, shared items got divided with mathematical precision, and anything I'd bought got left behind. I tried everything over those final 2 weeks. Love bombing. I'd wake up early to make him breakfast okay. I'd heat up frozen waffles and arrange them nicely. I'd wear his favorite outfits, suggest watching movies he liked, even offered to finally learn that card game he'd been trying to teach me for years. When that didn't work, I tried manipulation. I posted throwback photos on Instagram with captions like, "Some people give up too easily," and "Remember when we were happy." I had my mom comment things like, "You two are perfect together," and "Don't let pride ruin love." Then came the threats. I told him I'd report him to his employer for harassment. He showed me the security camera footage he'd saved of me throwing things at him during my meltdowns. I threatened to sue him for illegal eviction. He showed me the lease with only his name on it. Finally, I tried negotiation. "What if I pay all the rent, you can live here for free? With what money you couldn't afford a plane ticket?" Last week. "I'll get a second job. You can't even handle the first one properly." The day Eddie moved out, I followed him around the apartment like a lost puppy, making increasingly desperate offers. "You're really doing this? You're really throwing away 3 years? You threw it away when you made that spreadsheet planning to leave me," he said, loading the last box into his car. "That was just fantasy. Everyone thinks about leaving sometimes. So was thinking you could treat me like a walking ATM while planning your escape." He stood in the doorway for a moment, keys in hand, looking at me with something that might have been pity. "You'll regret this," I said, mascara running down my face. "Nobody will ever love you like I do." "God, I hope not," he replied, and then he was gone. 3 months later, I'm writing this from my childhood bedroom at my parents' house. The apartment required proof of income 3 times the rent to take over the lease, and even with my salary, I couldn't swing it without a co-signer. My dad, Nicholas, refused, saying I'm 27 and should figure it out myself. Living with Shantae and Nicholas is absolute hell. They make me pay $800 in rent, do my own laundry, follow a curfew, and contribute to household chores. Like I'm 16 again. My mom keeps asking when I'm going to get my life together, and my dad makes passive-aggressive comments about financial responsibility every morning over breakfast. The territory expansion I was so confident about went to Camden, my coworker, who actually attended the conference. She's making $95,000 now, while I'm still stuck at my old salary, sleeping in a twin bed surrounded by high school trophies and boy band posters my mom refused to take down. My friends finally found out the truth about our finances when I couldn't afford to go out for Everly's birthday dinner. The bill came to $400 for our group, and when everyone started splitting it, I had to admit I was broke. That's when the real story came out, that I owed Everly about $500 from various times she'd covered me, because I told her Eddie wouldn't let me spend money. She was furious when she learned I'd been lying about our financial situation. "You made me think he was controlling you when really you were just using him," she said. "I sent him nasty messages based on your lies." Eddie, meanwhile, is thriving. His rent is only $1,400. He's got money in savings for the first time in years. And I heard through mutual friends that he's seeing someone from his cycling club. Some girl who actually pays for her own stuff and doesn't need a man to subsidize her lifestyle. I tried texting him last week when my situation got particularly desperate. Living with my parents is hell. My dad makes me pay rent, and my mom won't do my laundry. He didn't respond. Then I tried again. "Can I borrow $500? I promise I'll pay you back." He sent me a link to Indeed.com and blocked me on everything. Look, I know what people will say. That I was manipulative, that I used Eddie, that I got what I deserved. But here's what they don't understand. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted what was fair. I made more money, so I should have had more say in our relationship. That's basic logic. The fact that Eddie couldn't handle being with a successful woman who knew her worth isn't my fault. And sure, maybe I had an exit strategy, but everyone thinks about leaving sometimes. That doesn't make me a bad person. It makes me realistic about relationships. Between us, maybe I could have handled things differently. Maybe I should have been more upfront about my expectations from the beginning. But that doesn't change the fact that Eddie was too weak to appreciate what he had. I challenged him, pushed him to be better, made him step up financially. And instead of rising to meet me, he chose to tear everything down. Now I'm stuck in this house with parents who treat me like a failure working a job that's going nowhere, while Eddie gets to play the victim and move on with his perfect new girlfriend, who probably doesn't have half my ambition or drive. But I'm not bitter. I'm just done pretending that wanting more for yourself is somehow wrong. If recognizing my own value and expecting to be treated accordingly makes me the bad guy in everyone else's story, then so be it. At least I know my worth, even if nobody else does.